let's talk to Chris, a different Chris from the UK, who's been waiting on the line for a while. I know so many Chris's. It's a Chrisception here. We're gonna get Chris Redfield, all kinds of Chris's. Anyway, Chris, you're calling in. What's up?
Hey,
Chris.
Hi.
There he is. How's it going, Chris? Good. Thanks for calling us. How can we help you?
Hi. Greetings from the UK.
Neat. What's up?
Hi. So first of all, I was going to say I'm originally from the States. Sorry for the delay in the call. I'm originally from the States, and I'm sorry for all that's going on in Texas. And I do fear it's probably going to spread across the country.
Yeah. I'm sorry for it too.
I apologize for that in that regard.
Yeah.
It's not great. What I'm calling about is in regards to the state. Sorry, in terms of that
keep going. Delay. It's a bad delay this time. Usually it's not that long, but anyway, I'm gonna keep silent. I'm gonna let you talk. So go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. Sounds good. Thank you. So I'm calling in regards to the Satanic Panic. So I'm a history teacher. I'm also a folklorist. So I'm looking at from that perspective. Are we in a continuation of the Satanic Panic, or are we going into a new Satanic Panic, i.e. QAnon and related situations, or am I over just thinking this?
Yes.
I think it's a little bit of both. So the Satanic Panic happened during a time where being an atheist, especially in the States, was a lot less normalized. Now, especially if you happen to be in a northern state, it's a little more lenient. It's not as bad as it used to be. It's still bad, especially like I live in Georgia. If I say I'm an atheist out in public randomly out here, it's not the safest environment for me to do so, but it's better than it would have been, during the 80s, during the D&D is going to corrupt your kids era of that. But there's a difference in zeitgeist shift that has happened here in the States, at least. And that is that when it comes to those more extremist varieties of thought, like QAnon and stuff like that, there's a lot of media pushback. And during the Satanic Panic, we actually didn't see that as often. If you look at a lot of the older news segments, they were very willing to bring on people all the time and not necessarily challenge them on things like Pokemon was going to corrupt your kids, or video games are going to cause your kids to go to hell, like stuff like that. It was a lot more frequent, and there was less media pushback on the whole from multiple news organizations. Whereas these forms of thought, they are not quite fringe anymore. QAnon is a bit more than fringe now, unfortunately. But it's not quite as prevalent as a lot of the evangelical panicking about D&D and stuff that we used to see. So I think that yes, we are heading in a direction where there is a lot more of this than there was 10 years ago, but I don't think we're heading in a direction where there's as much of that particular religious brand of fervor as there was in the 80s. Now, whether this brand of fervor is more or less caustic, that I think that maybe this one's a little more terrible, because with the older Satanic Panic, there was a lot of this media is bad, so don't do it. The QAnon narrative is a little bit more insipid. So less people, but it's worse on its own.
Okay. So I didn't expect this, Suris, but I actually have a dissenting opinion from you.
Okay.
I think the Satanic Panic never really ended. In a sense, I think what we are experiencing right now is quite possibly worse in many ways than what we first saw in the 80s and 90s with the Satanic Panic. So, like, first, I think we have to figure out what was the Satanic Panic. And I think you're correct in pointing out that mass media scares is really what it boils down to. A lot of mass media scares about what's happening versus, facts about the reality of a situation. So like one of the most expensive court cases in the history of the United States was during the Satanic Panic, which was at a lot of like allegations of satanic rituals and stuff, investigations of that was a part of it. And the reason why that particular case was so expensive was because they had to interview like 50 different children. I think it was even more than that on this supposed abuse that was happening that wasn't happening. Lots of stuff like that, other related stories, people locked up for crimes that didn't actually occur. I think that's the material effects of the satanic panic of what you could point to as the most harmful portions. We're right in that mainstream media is pushing back on it more, but we have more media sources now than we did in the 80s and 90s. And we have more publications that are willing to put out this fake narratives about QAnon, fake stuff about ivermectin, fake stuff about COVID, all kinds of stuff that we just didn't have before, or the ones that we did have simply weren't as prevalent. And I would say that is basically the new satanic panic. I mean, the attacks that happened earlier this year on January 6th at our Capitol is a result of QAnon. I fully believe that. And also is a result of this sort of new wave of misinformation that is happening through, select media sources. So I would say, yeah, we are experiencing a satanic panic. It's just come in a different form, and a much more sinister form as well.
I guess if I'm hearing that right, then if I'm looking at it from the perspective of what is accepted in as far as mainstream media is concerned, then my perspective is that it's not as bad. But if I have to factor in things like, several million sub YouTube channels that are able to spread all kinds of terrible propaganda, and there are people that believe it based on that, then yeah, I could understand that. There is certainly more access to misinformation.
Yeah. We didn't have an attack on the Capitol in the 90s. You know what I mean? Like that's what I think of as, I think what we're seeing now is quite a bit different and affects quite a lot more people. And I also think that it's affecting casual conversations and casual opinions on stuff. I mean, look at the vaccine rates in this country. Why are we seeing it so low? It's because not people with suffering from particular kinds of mental illness, rather, right? Or people who have really fringe beliefs. It's mainstream now to have skepticism of vaccines. And that used to be more of a fringe thing. And I think that's because we're seeing a lot of this information coming from these, fake news sources. So yeah, like I think this is a new satanic panic, but it's almost like the new normal, I don't know. Chris from UK, what do you think?
Wow. I appreciate both your perspectives on it. I'm trying to thread the needle and see if there's somewhere in the middle. I guess I'm going slightly a little bit more with you, Dan, on this. Like I said, I'm coming at this from a humanist perspective. I'm an atheist, but I also come from a Jewish background. And I guess maybe I'm a little sensitive and sometimes, for better or worse terms, some things I hear. I've heard students and even some of the parents I deal with on a regular basis will bring up things like adrenochrome. I've had to recently do a discussion about anti-Semitic tropes in QAnon, and I've heard people bring up strange things with witchcraft, drinking baby blood, and I'm like, wait, are we back in this? And it terrifies me, especially being an educator. And as you brought up about the whole case with, I believe it was either Canada or the U.S., where it took decades to finally free people who were innocent. I'm thinking as an educator, I'm like, oh, shoot, am I in the wrong career field at this point?
Well, and there's an aspect of this that gets, and I can understand with your background with a little bit more perspective, there's an aspect of this that gets really scary as well. And that's that not just with QAnon, but a lot of these used to be the Alex Jones-ish fringe conspiracies, but are accepted a lot more now. A lot of them kind of boil back to forms of anti-Semitism. When somebody's screaming about the globalist elites, if you press them hard enough on that, it ends up talking about Jewish people 9 times out of 10.
Oh yeah.
And it's really kind of scary that there's this almost euphemistic dog whistly language that people can fall back on to argue these things. But because of that, there are people that hear, like for instance, I've argued this on an earlier video, the difference between somebody on the left and then somebody who's a conspiracy theorist. If you tell them both, hey, there's a cabal of elites that are largely, controlling the world with the use of money, a leftist will go, well, yeah, look at what Jeff Bezos is doing. Look at lobbying. Look at the ways in which corporations are able to push our opinions and motives on things like climate change. And yeah, you'll get them to agree on that. But then if you talk to the conspiracy theorists, they'll agree with it too, but they just think that it's a bunch of, you know, globalist elites. And again, that boils down to anti-Semitism half the time.
Right.
The difference is the difference in the two, and the fact that you can get so many parallels between the two. And one of them is what I would consider to be a sane position. The idea that, you know, people are using money to influence politics. And then the insane position, there's a group of minorities that are trying to destroy the world via the Georgia Guidestones.
Right.
It's really scary how close you can get those two, like, very disparate beliefs.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Wait on that delay from Chris. There you go.
We live in interesting times.
Yes, we do live in interesting times.
It's
scary
times, gentlemen.
Yeah, even what scares me even more is a big difference even between now is, you know, it used to be, we're not talking about zines, we're talking about structured corporations with buildings that are putting stuff out there, and not even on a private level, but on a national level. There are even governments involved, foreign governments that are influencing discourse in this country as well too, that are also actively pushing disinformation. So like, I think we are dealing with a misinformation scare of certainly my lifetime, if not of you know, even going past generations. I don't know. I don't know if I'd be able to answer how this compares to other periods of American history, even world history, but it's certainly very scary. And I scramble to look at documentation on what's the best way to convince people and change their minds and help people. And I think a lot of people are looking for those resources right now. A lot of people scrambling to figure out what's the best thing. And unfortunately, everything I've seen, there's no easy answers to. There's some techniques, there's some thought processes, there's some theories, but outside of what only some of us can do, for the vast majority of us, it does feel kind of hopeless. Even now, like talking on this platform, I know that I'm mostly going to be talking to people who already agree with me. That's just the reality of putting out a show like this. And I wish I could be doing more. You know, I really do. But anyway, I'm going on a tangent here. Chris, I hope we answered your questions sufficiently. I appreciate you calling in, and thanks for asking such a thought-provoking question.
A question that managed to actually divide me and Dan on something too.
Yeah, which is interesting. But you know, we're scholars, Suris. You know, this is discourse, my friend.
I'm always okay with having dissenting opinions on opposite sides, even if they don't come to a resolution at the end, because that's the nature of being a human being who likes learning shit.
Yes, I agree with that sentiment totally.